Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Bench. I am your host, Brandon Stemwedel. On today's episode, I have the privilege to sitting down and talking to former West Brom player and Minnesota Kicks legend, Alan Merrick. How's it going today, Alan?
I'm doing great.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm fine.
we had a great opportunity of talking to Ian Barker before, and one of the things that he said is that you just have to go with technology the way that it is. This is kind of one of
Yep.
those
Oh, yeah.
moments.
Yeah. Well,
So,
we're both in our offices, so it works. It's okay.
absolutely. So, Alan, I mean, we've got a lot of new listeners, I'm assuming, and everything like that. So, why don't you give us a little bit of a background about yourself?
My background: I was born in England, in a place called Birmingham. It was a suburb of Birmingham. So I'm from what is sort of the Peaky Blinders area within Birmingham. Basically, growing up there, I was born in the 50s. So that was just after the war. So everything was still being built and developed around. The first thing I remember about playing soccer or having an interest in soccer is when I was probably about three or four, and I had uncles who were still living at home, a few years older than me, obviously. But they were only 5 or 6 years older than me. So I used to hang out with them on the street. We used to throw coats down in the middle of the road, and we played pickup soccer up and down the street. Obviously, there weren't that many cars or vehicles around, and there were still horse carts being pulled around with delivering milk. And you remember picking up your coat and belongings to make way for the milk cart to go by, deliver milk, and then we'd play again. Um, so that was my first experience to playing the game of soccer, and it was with big guys. I was 3 and they were 10, and so 5, 6, 7 years older than me. And so my uncles were the ones who introduced me to the game via their friends, and um, I just picked up the game. And obviously, I gained confidence by playing against big guys, and they were always accommodating. They'd allow me to nutmeg them or go by them perhaps and get a shot on goal, and just be nice guys. And that's what I remember. That was a fun experience of how to play, how the game was played. Um, Moving from one house, I was in Northfield, Birmingham, and I moved from Northfield, Birmingham, to the other side of the city, to a little village called Waterorton, and that was a little village that typical English village with a stream running through it, a railway track, a railway station, and access to other cities via the bus services, etc. So moving across the city allowed me to expand my playing, and it was where, at the age of 11, I went to what is called a grammar school. So it's like a high school, but it's got a special classification. You have to take an exam to get into this type of high school. So
Sure.
I went to Coleshill Grammar School, and I was fortunate enough there that I had two masters, sports masters, who gave me a great experience in athletics and gymnastics and just all the sporting activities. I was already a good athlete and played for uh, select teams before the move. So when I was 10 and 11, I was playing for a select team, and it was Birmingham boys. So I was representing Birmingham, which is a major city. It's the second largest city in the UK.
Hmm.
And so representing Birmingham at that age represented that I was doing something right and being recognized. Um, I don't remember any coaching, but from until sort of going to grammar school to these teachers who were they came from a renowned college, Loughborough College, which is it just develops massive numbers of great teachers, and they're all sort of getting their master's degrees and PhDs in sports psychology and the sports. And I was fortunate to get a couple of those guys who helped me along in those informative years of 11, 12, 13. By the age of 12, my playing with and representing Birmingham in tournaments, etc. That's where the Birmingham soccer clubs, the professional clubs, went to scout. And so within the Birmingham area, there's Birmingham City, which is right in the middle. You've got West Bromwich Albion, which is where I eventually ended up, 5 miles north. Then there's Wolverhampton Wanderers, who are another 3 miles north. Then you've got Walsall, and you've got Coventry, and then you've got other sort of circle, Leicester, clubs that are all in that vicinity. So when I was 12, I signed a contract with West Bromwich Albion. I signed schoolboy forms, and basically I signed a contract that allowed me to go to train on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and so I went to West Bromwich Albion and got that experience of being coached for the first time. And obviously the junior coaches there were former players, and so they had great expertise. They'd had great experiences, and they translated that into the game for me. They told me exactly what to do and told me emphatically what not to do. Don't you ever do that type thing. And it was like, oh, okay. So I think you've experienced that in sort of camp life, where a coach tells you, hey, you're doing great doing this. Why the heck would you do anything else? And so you learn those lessons quickly.
How did you get scouted to get on with West
Because
Brom?
I was representing Birmingham.
Okay.
Birmingham boys, and we were playing in tournaments. I remember going up to Liverpool and playing against Chester-le-Street, and it's a little suburb just outside of Liverpool.
Sure.
And so going and playing in those areas, that's where the scouts from all of the clubs in England, that's where they would congregate and watch us play.
Sure.
So I was somewhat of an exception because I was left-footed.
Oh.
And so not only left-footed, I had a really good left foot. I played for 17 years as a pro, and I think I only used my right foot twice, and that was to kick a player. I'm joking, but it's really my left foot was so good that I'm going, well, I don't think I will. I'm not going to put my right leg up to do that. I'll just bring it in with my left leg, and so I'd bring it on with the outside of my left foot and bring it down, and it would be fine. Sure. And so, obviously, growing up in the 50s and the 60s, it was before television,
right?
And so, I can't imagine it now, but we didn't have television. If you wanted to watch soccer, you had to go to the cinema and watch the Pathé News or a news clip that would depict some form of soccer. The televisions only became sort of prevalent in the mid 60s, and my parents didn't have a TV in the early 60s. I had to go to a neighbor's house to watch TV, and it was 2 stations, BBC and ATV.
Sure.
ITV, and getting to watch soccer was impossible on that format or in that environment. I was fortunate that my dad took me to the soccer games. He took me to Birmingham City. He was a supporter of Birmingham City and an avid supporter. And so I was fortunate to be taken from the early age of sort of 8 and 9. And that's where I picked up the game, really, was watching the superstars of Birmingham and the other clubs that they were playing, going to the park after the game and trying to emulate that experience. And invariably, it was by myself because it was only my dad and I traveling to the game and getting home. And so there were no neighborhood kids who would do that. So it was almost like I became a coach then, because I would go with the group of kids that were at the park at that time or playing in the street, and I'd tell them the story of what I'd just done at St. Andrews, which is the name of the stadium for the Birmingham City team. I'd say, well, you should have seen this player do this, and this is what this other guy did. And so I would do a recital of the features of the game that happened, and the other kids would try and emulate it, and I'd try and explain it to them and show it and demonstrate. And so it's like I was doing that when I was 8 and 9. So it's like it's the progressions that I've done in the game where eventually I coached professionally. It was all from that experience of watching a game, reliving it, trying to regurgitate elements that were important to me at that time. And the kids took notice of it, and we developed as players.
So what did it, so kind of recapping a little bit too. So when you signed your first professional contract, what did that mean to you? How did it make you feel, and where did you see it going?
Well, my first professional contract was when I was 17.
Sure.
So that's after I'd left high school and completed that portion of education. West Brom offered me a contract, and I went to the club, and you sign a professional contract, but it's really you're signing form that makes you an apprentice. So okay. You're a full professional, but you are an apprentice. So you have to earn your living, as it were. As it was almost servient in terms, because you had to make sure that the showers were clean, the restrooms were clean, towels were brought in, boots were put up in the drying room. England is a wet country, and the boots used to take ages to dry between games, etc. And there were special tasks that apprentices had to do, and the clubs had a large squads of players there. They would have probably 20 first team players, 15 reserve team players, and then they would have 14 apprentices. The apprentices would be doing all of the grunt work, but you're in that same environment as the pro players. When I was 17, and in those locker rooms, the first team had a locker room, and then the reserves and the apprentices had another locker room. But you're intermingling with the superstars of the club at that time, national team players from multiple countries. And so the experience is rubbed off as to what a good player looks like and what the expectations are. And it's there in front of you. And if you don't look at it,
paying your dues, essentially, right? Like, so you were doing all this grunt work so that way you earned your stripes.
Well, sort of like that. It was a lot of it was because the management, the president of the club, the owner of the club, as it were, he was just a cheapskate, and so he did everything on the cheap, and so that was more like, and that's a better description, perhaps, rather than paying your dues.
Right.
So, but it worked out for me. I signed as a 17-year-old on apprentice forms. By the age of 18, I was a full-time pro, and I played on the England youth team in the Junior World Cup in France. Played against Bulgaria, Russia, and the Netherlands, and all of the Bulgarians and the Russians, they were not under 18, like we had. I mean, some of these guys, they looked as if they were past 25 and possibly as high as 30, and it was like it was an eye opener to go, oh my goodness. But those were great experiences. We didn't lose a game, but we didn't go through either. One of the teams, the Russians dominated it, and they had a lot of older players, mature players.
What position did you play?
I had a great experience learning. There, I was playing. I played either left back or central midfield.
Sure.
And so I eventually, my best position was left-sided defender.
Sure.
And so almost as a sweeper, but when you're playing 4-4-2, then your two center backs are alongside each other. But if the one center half is going, then I would drop off and do all the covering and cleaning up.
Sure.
So I think that was probably my best position. But I also played in the central midfield as a defensive midfield player there. And so I was versatile.
Sure.
But it was because I was left-sided, left-footed player.
Sure. Sure. And I remember you telling me this, like, just in conversation and such, but I remember you saying that you guys didn't actually have like specific jerseys, that they were handed to you like the day of the game. And
yep, it was one. There were 11 shirts.
That was it.
And if you weren't a goalkeeper, then you would get one of the other 10 shirts.
Sure.
So the goalkeepers never had numbers on it, those days. But it was we had 10 shirts, and you normally picked it. The right back would be 2, left back would be 3, 6 would be the center back, left-sided. 5 would be the center half. Then you'd go across the line. 7 would be a right winger, 11 would be a left winger, 9 and 8 would be target players, forwards, and then you'd have 4 in the middle as well, depending on what the formation was.
Yeah.
I think I gave you 10 numbers. Yeah.
That sounded about right.
So when in the modern day now, when I hear people going, "Oh, he's a number 6," and I'm going, in what era is he a number 6? I just shake my head and going, this is alien. What position is a number 43 these days? What position is Beckham as a 23?
Yeah.
And I'm going, don't go that route of having numbers for a position. You just you call it what it is.
So at your time, what made you, when you signed your contract at 18? So
yeah,
was there constant negotiations? Like, is it more of like the modern day still, where you have like an agent and they kind of talk for you? And
no, it was like, well done, Alan. You've really impressed us. We want to sign you to a contract. Here you go. This is what you're earning.
That's it.
Do you want to play? Do you want to play for us or not? It was pretty. It was different. A little later on, the negotiations came later.
Sure.
Like when I was 18, I made the first team and started to play, and so I kept on getting bumps in terms of decent salary.
Sure.
But there wasn't the money in the game in those days. There was no TV.
Right.
There was there was very little marketing going on. It was the local garage. It was the local butcher. It was the local painting group. It was the local mechanical company who had got the supporters boards, as it's called.
Sure.
That around this field.
Sure.
And there was and there were actual signs. So you were buying signage, it was actual signs. It's not like you see now with all of the digital experience that's there and the graphics that they can put up there.
Yeah.
I mean, you can watch a movie on those new devices.
Oh my gosh.
That wasn't the case later.
They're so advanced.
That wasn't the case in the 70s and 80s.
Sure. But I mean, even still, like coming from West Brom and stuff like that, like I've heard of West Brom, and I've lived in the States my whole life, and they've had some great teams, and it seems like it's nice because you came from a program where you kind of developed it and kept it going to where it is now. Like obviously they got relegated this year, but still.
Yeah, they're on a cycle, and you have to look at West Brom and their management. They've some clubs they're able to go for decades without major overall and interference, as it were, from the hierarchy in the back rooms. But West Brom have had multiple ownership changes, and I think that's affected them and not got them a cohesive management thrust that allows them to flourish even more.
Sure.
Because they're one of the original 10 clubs in India.
I
And
did know that.
so it's, I mean, the heritage that they have is phenomenal. And hopefully they can get back into that niche of being a dominant force.
Sure. So like talk a little bit more about like West Brom and the in the sense of the culture of the area. You know, you've talked a little bit about like a little bit around West Brom. You talked about like where Birmingham is and all of that. But what was like
Yeah.
the culture of the people? What was that like? Is being a
Yeah,
professional?
that's a good question. It's like West Bromwich is a very industrialized place. I mean, there's lots of heavy industry there, and so you if you're trying to compare the cultures, Birmingham is the main city. West Bromwich is one of the outer cities.
Sure.
Um, with all of its they call it the black collar area because the people who work there are in factories. And I don't know whether you've seen Peaky Blinders and watched that show type
Hmm.
thing. So that typifies what West Bromwich is renowned for, and that is hardworking individuals who are in that they're in jobs that are they get dirty, they get grubby, um, and so in the difference is in Birmingham, that's a white collar type work there where there's a lot more commerce going on. There's a lot more um, yeah, there's just a lot more cleaner environment as it were.
Sure.
The culture for West Brom is that if your parents were part of West Brom, everybody else in that family stays with West Brom. So they're very loyal to and proud of their heritage and and what they've achieved.
Sure. Tell us more about so playing for West Brom. What
Yeah.
was probably one of your most memorable games that you had for West Brom and why?
Um, one that comes to mind, and I don't know why, but well, I suppose because I was a defender, so I didn't score many. It was a game against Manchester United, and I think we went one up. They tied it, and I scored what would be the winning goal from a corner. And I've seen the picture of it where it's like I rise out of the, you know, off the floor, and it looks like I'm at least 2 feet higher than anybody else. And I had the ball into the net. And it was one of the few games that was on TV. So that was a televised game on a Saturday night. And so um, you get a little bit more prestige from that where other people go, oh, that was an incredible goal. Um, and so that was sort of that was real early 70s, probably 70, 71.
Beyond the Bench is sponsored by BiPro, the ideal lifestyle choice for athletes and health enthusiasts, by providing clean protein without artificial ingredients or sugars. Whether you're looking for a pre- or post-workout supplement or a quick drink on the go, visit motisports.com to receive 25% off your next BiPro item.
So how long were you with West Brom?
Well, I signed when I was 12 and I left when I was 26. So I was there for 14 years, but on a professional contract, I was only there for 10. And that's another reason why I left at that age is because the chairman of the board, the guy who was running it all, didn't want to pay me for being there with 10 years service. Anybody who has 10 years service there is awarded a testimonial game where you basically have the actual team, the squad of players, and then you either bring in another team from somewhere or you bring in an all-star team and make an all-star team. And then you as a recipient of a testimonial, you would take all the funds that were generated from that game.
Sure. And he just didn't want to
And
do that for you?
he didn't want to do that for me. Yeah. So that's when I came to the United States.
And so like
In
how did
actual
that all
fact,
spark?
well, the coach manager of the Kicks was Freddie Goodwin, Well, Freddie Goodwin was also the head coach manager of Birmingham City, the club just down the road,
Ah,
and the club I grew up with, and the club I supported as a youth. He tried to sign me 3 times from West Bromwich Albion to Birmingham City, and I knew nothing about it. I had no knowledge of his interest, no knowledge of the offer, and it would have been a wonderful move for me to,
sure.
because I played, obviously, in a 10-year period there. I played 167 games or something like that. So I wasn't getting full-time playing time in the first team, but I was an integral part of the squad. But going to another team, another club, then it gives a new dimension to your career and what happens. It also would have been a big boost in my earning capacity.
Sure.
So he tried to sign me for three separate events, and he found out that I was becoming a free agent and was going to be able to negotiate whatever I needed.
Mhm.
So he was here in the United States, in Minnesota, and he called me in March, and by April we'd signed a contract, and I was actually in the United States. So I came over because it was Freddie Goodwin. I knew him in Birmingham. I'd watched his games. I'd watched him as a coach and a manager, and it made sense. And I had 2 young kids, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and it was a chance to get them the idea of what the United States is about. I'd already been on a tour to the United States and Canada in 1968, and so I knew exactly what was happening over here. So I thought it was a good opportunity to let them have a vacation, see what it's like, and we make decisions from there. So came to the Kicks, and we made that a successful club, and I stayed with them for 5 years. I had one year hiatus, didn't get on well with the coach who was here, so I had a 1-year hiatus, and then came back, and then the ownership of the Kicks was in a disarray, and it was sold to a British group who shouldn't have been allowed to own a club, and so they put it into litigation that we couldn't extract it from. So it was a strange. I mean, when the Minnesota Kicks left, we were averaging 32,000 fans a game, and we'd done that for 3 years in a row, and it was basically double of what the Twins were getting. I mean, the Twins would have 15,000 a game. We would
Right.
have 32 average, and we had several shutouts. Not shutouts. We did have a few shutouts of games, but
Yeah.
we had sellouts of games
Wow.
where we filled the old Met Stadium with 45, 46,000 people. When Pele came, when we had concerts that were played in afterwards, the Beach Boys played a concert straight after us, so it was like mayhem in the parking lots and
Yeah.
stadium.
Well, it's just an absolute event. Like, what was such the difference as far as like playing over in England to then coming here? Like, what's the difference in culture that you would say at that time?
Um, I mean, the culture is, England is England, and they have, they have a pretty stable culture going through each of the cities, each of the venues of a club. The culture is made there, and it depends. If it's West Brom, it's black collar people, honest to goodness people who are full of endeavor. Birmingham City is more white collar. London, you start to get changes in London with the big clubs there as well, who build their own culture. Arsenal, storied clubs. So culture doesn't change that much from city or county to cities in the UK.
Sure.
In the US, I think the culture is inherent as to what state it is. I
Sure.
mean, Minnesota is Minnesota nice. Everybody everybody treats everybody with dignity and respect, and there's only a few people who don't do that, unfortunately. So playing in the States was where we knew coming into Minnesota is that they don't know what the game of soccer is. So we had a different culture going on where we were educators of the Twin Cities population and then the greater Twin Cities. And then it was like out into the boonies. I remember going up to Duluth and down to Albert Lee and out to Lac Capal and just doing clinics and sessions to create a culture. This is what soccer's about. You know, you've got 11 players on the field, a round ball. Nobody can handle it except the goalkeeper. And you'd have to start from scratch to build that soccer culture.
Right.
And I remember going in the winters of 77 and 78. I went to every Minnesota high school and middle school, every single one. We used to do 3 clinics a day. And, you know, traveling through snowstorms and having an assembly of the school where everybody would be in the gymnasium, you know, seated, or the auditorium, or whichever they've got. And we will be doing a soccer clinic and trying to get find out who the most popular teacher is and bring them out so that we can get them to head a ball and to make a fool of themselves, and get the headmaster or headmistress of the school, the principal, get them out to do the same thing. And then it worked because we had a great following.
Absolutely.
So, you know, and there were 4 of us who were the principal instructors and doers of that.
Sure. So you
and
were no
so-
longer like doing the grunt work and stuff like that. You were the one that was more up on top and stuff, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I was 26 then. I was in my prime as a soccer player, so it's
Sure.
like I'd already done the grunt work as to, you know, how to play this game and how to get by.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I guess one of the things that I've been mentioning is the culture, but I guess the one piece that I'm wanting a little bit more of is what's the difference in the environments that you've been able to be a part of? So over in England, the environment there, as far as obviously the people there, but the event itself, like what was the environment like in the dressing rooms and all of that too?
There's not much change in the locker rooms, etc. You've got a lot more. Well, you've got a lot of passion, the pent up passion with a lot of clubs. So the fans are somewhat hostile. They do not like another club to come into their facility and to take advantage of their team. So that sort of is for some players, that was intimidating. Like going up to Liverpool and playing there, and you see the Kop. And when I was playing, this was before they had all seat stadiums. There used to be terraces with just barriers that stopped the rush of fans getting up on their tiptoes and toppling over and going forward, like the Hillsborough massacre that was there. So things changed because of some of those fans who were so excited about their team that they caused accidents to happen in the terraces. But the verbal abuse that the opposite fans give each other is just it's just a natural thing for me. Hopefully, it doesn't get out of hand at any time. But that's your culture. It's who's got the best songs, who's got the funniest people that can mimic and make a little fun of the opponent, and it becomes prevalent and also raucous at times. But it's one of those where learning the game, the culture that I learned sports in, is that you play like crazy during the game, and then as soon as the whistle is gone, you're back to treating each other but like pure human beings, and you take away all the animosity that you just fired up in any encounter that you play against another team. So those are, as I said, the the two Fayette teachers that I had that were both from Loughborough, they taught me all of those principles of behavior within the structures that they had within their games. And I played basketball, field hockey, rugby, soccer, cricket, field and track. I mean, I did absolutely everything within the structure of my high school. And so that gave me a great grounding as to be realistic of what a sport is about and build that culture that you're talking about. So it manifests itself in a higher level of comprehension of it. Like the teachers that I had made sure that it was implanted in me as to the correct approach, the correct disciplines.
Sure. So like because again, like soccer was just so new and no one knew anything about it. How did the environment change there? Like people, you said 32,000 people came to a game.
No, we averaged 32. Yeah.
Averaged. Oh gosh. So even there was more people than that at some of the games. So again, like
Yeah.
what was the environment like there? I mean, the most that I played in front of was 15,000, and I thought that was electrifying. And I was like, right in the city of Detroit, just nothing but people there, and you're warming up, and people are screaming and yelling at you, and everything about you and your mother.
I think you've got 2 or 3 levels of performance going on here. So as soon as you get to 30,000 plus and more, there's so much noise going on there that it just becomes a hum.
Yeah.
And so you can then get into tune with that hum and just, it's like, it's like you see the Buddhist monks sitting down and praying, and and it's that hum that you get into. Very often you can hear sections of the crowd starting to come up with chants, and so then it depends. I mean, that's when the culture is developed, where they're doing funny songs, where they're making fun of the opponent, and like in England they say, well, they're taking the mickey. It's like they're giving them the business type thing.
Yeah.
And so that's when it becomes hilarious for me, because you're doing your job and you're waiting for the next outrageous element to unravel within the crowd.
Sure. Yeah, it's so interesting to me, because I obviously, like, I've been to like some of the Minnesota United games, and I feel like it's so electric, and yet I'm so curious to know, like, if it's comparable, like how much has it grown since you originally
it hasn't grown anymore. I mean, it's like it is what it is. It's one of those principles of the event. This is what happens. So get used to it real quick, because we don't want you to get stage scared and be unprepared. So be prepared for horns to go off. Be prepared to be booed when you make a bad pass. Be prepared to accept adulation when you do something good. But remember, the game goes on, and so it's like you've got to be as level-headed as you possibly can. You can't do strange things within the structure of the game. You can't overstep the mark. You don't want to overstimulate yourself so that you pull a muscle, do something strange, have a sort of a crazy event happen to you. You need to be cool, calm, and collected. And that was the easy thing for me, because it was like it happened to me from a very young age. With West Brom, our reserve team, we used to get 4,000 or 5,000 fans. Because there was no TV, so they came to the reserve games when we were playing. If we were playing Aston Villa at Villa Park, then you couldn't get into that stadium because it was packed. So the West Brom fans we'd be playing Villa reserve, so you would have a reciprocal game going on. So the fixture was West Brom are playing Aston Villa this weekend. The reserves are playing, and the first team, and perhaps the second and third youth teams that they've got there. So everybody would be playing each other for Pride and Prejudice. and so it would be unveiled, and you at the reserve game in a venue like that, we'd get 4,000 or 5,000 fans, and they'd be looking at the scoreboard because that's all there was. There was no graphics, there was no TV commentary. There was probably radio commentaries going on, but not everybody had a radio. That was one in the early 70s.
Sure.
So it was like it was a mad situation that you found encountered.
Sure. So I mean, like that. So based on everything that you've been saying so far, too, like those psychological aspects, from your uncles playing with them and playing with people that were older than you and all of that too, like don't you feel like those psychological pieces really helped you with growing that confidence to be able to handle a lot of that banter that you were getting as a player?
No, it's like it all becomes ingrained in your day-to-day activities within the game. It's you understand what the coaches are looking for. You know, on a Tuesday and a Thursday night when I was a young player, it was I listened to the instructions of the coaches. I admired what they'd done as players. They were informational, they were instructional, they cut to the quick. There was no BS. It was do this, do that. And so it was the structure and the culture is transforming young players into players who know exactly how to handle each situation.
Mm.
I mean, we had a gymnasium at West Bromwich Albion. It was like a basketball court, but the walls were 15-foot walls, and we used to have 2 holes in the ends where the goals were.
Mm.
And you'd play 5v5 in there, and you get absolutely battered against the walls. I mean, the physical exertion there and the physical presence of, I remember playing in there against the first team when I'm sort of 15, and I suddenly find myself that one of them called me in to play because one of the players walked off with an injury, and one of the players called me in, Merrick, come on, get in here. And so I'm playing with all of the first team players as a 15-year-old on the apprentice contract. And it's like, oh my goodness, that shot just missed me, and it was going at 70 miles an hour. It would have just taken my head up, concussion time.
Yeah.
And then if you messed up on your first touch, you were going to be eaten alive by these guys. I mean, and they took no quarter. It was like they'd pin you up against the wall, and you'd be brushing off cement from your forearm or the side of your head, where you just clattered into this solid brick wall.
Sure.
There was no way of shying away from the physical contact that was in there, and the environment that set up. It was like, that's why I became a really, really confident one-touch player. I didn't need to. You don't need to. You learn that you don't. You've got to be unbelievable skilled to be able to exist in that environment.
Right.
When you've got 180-pound, fully grown athletes who are in prime condition, and they want the ball.
Yeah.
And you've got it, and they're going to get it. And so you go, there's a reality there where, the coach on the sidelines, get rid of it quick.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, yeah, I think I know what you mean. It's just reinforced that you don't do that. You must do this.
Yeah.
And so those environments are very difficult to create, because who would know that they'd send a young kid in because a player got injured? But that happened, and you have to be prepared for that either. Otherwise,
Sure.
you couldn't be shy about being in that environment. You had to stand up for your presence amongst these guys.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can only imagine that, and all of that too, they're just educating you on being prepared for that hostile environment. If you went to a rival game, and you have to be prepared for what's going to happen. I feel like that culture just kind of created itself for you there. What was one of your
leading on from that, they put that culture into you, and if you don't step up to the mark, then you don't stay in that culture very long.
No.
So there's sort of a written law where you better be ready for it, because they're not going to mess around. You haven't got a lot of time. You have to be on your mettle and doing it correctly, real quick.
Beyond the Bench is provided by MOTI Sports. MOTI Sports is the ultimate youth soccer training tool, utilizing 3D motion capture technology to teach soccer skills and drills that can be studied from any angle. Coaches, parents, and players can download the MOTI Sports mobile app from the Apple App Store and Google Play. Check us out at motisports.com.
What was one of your favorite stadiums to play in?
Liverpool. I mean, Anfield is tremendous.
Yeah.
Villa Park is also one of those iconic stadiums in England, and obviously with it being in Birmingham, they were way ahead of the learning curve or the stadium curve there. So Villa Park, I mean, that's where they used to play all of the FA Cup rounds on a neutral ground, and so it's still a magnificent stadium. Obviously now you've got Newcastle built a super stadium up north. United Stadium was always a great place, Manchester United. Even though it's always crazy to me that they endanger the athletes because of the sloping banks
slope.
They have there.
I've always wondered that.
It's really sort of mind-boggling to me to go. The more players should probably have hurt themselves on this, but that's sort of an abnormality that still exists, and that's where the cultures are developed again.
Right. Well, and like Villa Park is probably one of my favorites. Like before they did the renovations, because the fans were so close to the field, and now they've done those renovations and fans are further away. It was the same thing with West Ham United. Where were they playing?
Well, they've taken over the Olympic Stadium, so it's like that's just an outrageous stadium for them to be able to just slide into. That's great progress for them.
Absolutely. What was one of your favorites here in the United States? What was one that
Giant Stadium?
Giant Stadium.
When we played the Cosmos.
Against the great Pele.
So we've played in there, 76,000 people.
Wow. What was that like? What was that like to play
hostile.
Against Yeah.
Oh, it was hostile, but playing against Pele, he was such a great figurehead. He's a great human being. He's excellent off the field as well. I mean, he's very amiable. Mary and I had dinner with him here once when he came into town at the Walker Art Museum, and it's just a pleasure to be around his company and players like him. It's like, and there are so many still in the United States that stayed. He's in New York.
Yep. Yeah,
he's in New York.
He didn't go too far, and I know that there's a lot that Maldini actually. He was in Florida for the longest time. He owns Miami FC or something like that. It's I believe it's an NPSL program. But that's incredible. So how long did you play here in the United States before retiring?
I played 6 years.
6 years. And then
6 years. I came in 76, and I left playing from the U.S. national team, Team America, when the club sort of disbanded. Then I decided that I had tagged my family and the kids moving from state to state. I'd been in too many cities in a short period of time, and I needed to get stabilized again, and brought them back to Minnesota. So I came back to Minnesota in 82. No, 83. I came back in 83 after playing with the with Team America, and it's the same year that the Minnesota Strikers came in. Joe Robbie brought his team up from Fort Lauderdale, and I immediately went to work for them as the director of their community relations program.
And how was
I did
that transition?
I did that for me. It was an easy transition because I'd already done that for the last 5 years with for the Kicks. So
Okay.
it's what I was doing with the Kicks. I was a player, but I was also part of the community outreach, as it was. So it was an easy task for me. I was hoping that I would play for the Strikers, but the coach deemed it that I was not a good fit. So I stayed in the front office, and then at the end of that year, the league was not doing too well, and so we were going into the indoor league and play the major indoor soccer league and play at Met Center. And I became the coach straight after that season ended. They switched over from the coach who'd just been in charge, and I took over that responsibility. So I utilized that time to learn a lot more about the game.
In a different capacity, right? Because I mean, that was my next question. Actually, it segues perfectly. Is, as a player, you prepare and you analyze things differently than when you're in like the front office. I can't even imagine with like where was your head at through that whole process? From training every single day to.
I found it very easy. I mean, as we spoke earlier, I mentioned that when I was 8 and 9, I was coming back from games at Birmingham City's St Andrews Stadium, coming back to my community in Northfield, and showing them what the team was just doing, what the players were doing, and some of the intricacies of the game. So I was, to all intents and purposes, I was a coach from the age of 8 through 10.
Sure.
Watching those games, transferring the information to my peer group, whoever it was there, who was ready to listen, tell the story of the game that I just watched. And so I was always a coach. It was like,
sure,
it was a natural thing. It was on the teams that I played, I was a natural leader. I took responsibility. I gave instructions. I made people feel good, play good, and hopefully had good performances myself. And so I was, I took on a different responsibility when I was playing. I was always a nurturing type of player.
So when you and we were talking before, this seemed to be like a question that you were really excited about. And knowing everything that you know now, what would you tell a 10 or 12-year-old now? Like, what is something that you wish that you knew? What is something that would be really beneficial?
You could never be too fit.
Can never be too fit.
But you need specialized training. And by specialized training, I just mean trying to develop your fast twitch muscle makeup is something that I would tell a 10 and 12-year-old to do that. I mean, I have 2 grandkids who both play soccer here, but their environment that they're in now is so complicated, so busy, that they don't stop and listen to some of that. So I have a 13-year-old who is an exceptional player, but he is small or smaller, and the powers that be in the Twin Cities don't want him on the United program or that accelerated program. And so he needs to go and do more plyometrics. He needs to do more agility. He needs to have more mobility and strength in his legs. And so the other thing that needs to be done is that he can't do soccer and that type of training 12 months of the year.
Sure.
You have to program it now so that you get the best out of that individual's capabilities. So these 10s and 12-year-olds, learn about plyometrics, learn about fast twitch muscles, learn about stretching, learn about the correct strength measurements that you need. You need to be balanced. And it's like, that's why I sort of premised it with, don't think about soccer all the time. When I was growing up, I did all the sports. At high school, I played cricket, rugby, I told you, soccer, field hockey. I ran track, I played cricket, I did basketball, I did badminton, I did tennis. And so it's like I've got 9 sports that I was playing. So I was a very well-rounded athlete, as it were. But the biggest factor would be, can you get it into another gear? With whatever you're doing, can you put it into another gear? And what is that gear? And we mentioned it earlier. It's really impossible to coach speed, but you can train speed.
For sure. I mean, the biology of a human being and where your genetics come from and stuff like that too. That's a big part of it. And yeah, I totally agree.
Well, it's my grandson at the moment. He's 13, and he hasn't had his growth spurt.
Sure.
He's likely to have a growth spurt, and his his mom and his father are tall people.
Sure.
If the kid gets as big as his dad, he's going to be 6'1". Wow. And so that's an incredible size.
It's an incredible size.
I mean, I played at 5'10", and so having that extra 2 inches or 3 inches, I would have been an unstoppable centre back. You can't do anything about that. That's in your genetics. But knowing now what I know, I would supplement some speed and fast twitch muscle development and know how to excite my fast twitch muscles so that I can react so much faster. And the rest of it is being a student of the game. I was fortunate that a couple of the Phi Ed teachers confided in me as a captain of the teams, both rugby, field hockey, and soccer. And they installed this ability to be able to analyze the game and absorb the game and also find the nuances within the game so that I can always come out on top.
Sure. Yeah.
I learned from these Phi Ed teachers, from them teaching me rugby, and they were both rugby experts, as it were, not soccer experts, they were rugby experts. But I learned from them how to dominate the opponent. And I hurt opponents because I could make tackles and dispossess them and do it in a way that it ruffled their feathers.
Sure.
And
that makes perfect sense.
I didn't just take the ball off them. I took a piece of them as well.
Sure.
Of course. They didn't want to make another. They didn't want to come anywhere near me anymore. So it was like the physical attributes of that, and also the mental confidence that I got from that. When I was playing in my career, then I'd take on the 6'2" guys, no problem.
Sure.
I'd give up my 4-6 inches of height, and that wouldn't affect me at all.
Sure.
I would come out and still get the ball, still make a presence, make people uncomfortable that, I don't want to go anywhere near him.
Right.
I used to get really scary actually at times, so it's funny. I laugh at it now. I laugh at it.
All right, Alan. Well, I just have a handful of questions here. These are more of the rapid fire questions.
Absolutely.
They don't really focus on soccer, but yet I think some of them do. The very first question I have is, who's your biggest role model and why?
My biggest role model and why? I would have to say my stepfather and my mom.
Sure.
They taught me all of the things that I need to become to be a good person in life. The life lessons they taught me are paramount.
Absolutely. I feel like that's great. Who's your favorite current player?
Current player. Good question. There's so many good players.
So many.
I've got to go Ronaldo.
Ronaldo.
He's so dominant,
Mm.
and he takes the game to the opponent. He is so one-dimensional. He wants to put the ball in the back of the net. He wants to beat the other team, and then straight after that, you've got Messi, and then straight after that, you've got yeah. So, but at the moment, I think that Ronaldo is an animal.
Awesome. If you could meet someone, past or present, who would it be and why?
Past or present? There are too many people again. There's so many. Bringing it down to one is really, really complex, really difficult.
I agree. That's why I asked it.
But I'll give you an answer.
Sure.
Winston Churchill.
Why is that?
Because he makes you think. He makes statements that are so profound and makes you think.
I have a feeling.
And he was such a strategist as well, obviously in war and also in politics.
Sure.
So there's a good answer for you.
All right.
Winston
Favorite book.
Churchill.
What's your favorite book?
My favorite book? Oh boy, what can I say? I'm going to say Lee Child, Night School.
Night School, Lee Child. I'm always looking for a good book, so I'm always going to put that down.
I'll let you into a secret. I just looking past your screen here, I have a bookshelf, and it's the easiest one for me to read.
Yeah.
I mean, I have all of these books in front of me here.
Sure.
So I just look up, and Lee Child, Night School is the most prominent up there. So I think I read some of it.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to look into that one for sure. All right. Who was a player that you hated defending?
None of them. I loved it.
You loved it.
I'd back myself against anybody.
Perfect.
I mean, I know my one of my favorite players that I tried to emulate was Dave McKay. Dave McKay, Scottish guy, played for Tottenham, and he then went to Derby County. Dave McKay. Okay. He was tough as nails.
Tough as nails.
And I don't mind admitting that I sort of try to emulate him and copy his standing. Yeah.
All right. My last question that I have for you is, who do you wish you would have played with, past and present?
Pele, Johan Cruyff, Maradona. Because I played with a lot of good players as well.
Yeah.
But those are players that you go, well, that would have been nice to have an opportunity to do that. I miss playing with Johan Cruyff by 6 weeks.
Oh.
They couldn't afford both of us, so I came to LA and they shipped him off to Washington.
Oh. Wow,
so that would
have been something.
With Rinus Michels, the coach.
Wow.
So,
wow.
But that gave me an opportunity to be brainwashed by Rinus Michels. I stayed with Rinus the first part of the season. I was recovering from an Achilles ankle tear.
Sure.
And so, or tendon tear. It was a tear in my Achilles. And so I was able to spend time with him on the practice field. When the players were there, I was on the sidelines doing my own workouts type thing for 8 weeks.
Sure.
And then I came back to play, and I was signed by the LA Aztecs. And then I used to spend times on the planes and in the hotels. I used to just, Rinos, let's sit down, talk to me. And it's like I became a sponge.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Well, Alan, I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you giving us all this insight about everything that you've had go on in your career, and we really appreciate it, and paving the path for a lot of these young players nowadays too, because you do a lot of great work. Your community outreach has been continuing on even to today. So really appreciate it, and again, great role model. Thank you.
Appreciate it. You take care.
You as well. Wow. As you can hear, Alan's journey is unique and helps pave the path for future pros. I hope you enjoyed learning about Alan and learning the different cultures of how America was being introduced to soccer and what the system is like over in the UK. Thanks for joining me on Beyond the Bench. See you next time.
Beyond the Bench is provided by MOTI Sports. MOTI Sports is the ultimate youth soccer training tool, utilizing 3D motion capture technology to teach soccer skills and drills that can be studied from any angle. Coaches, parents, and players can download the MOTI Sports mobile app from the Apple App Store and Google Play. Check us out at motisports.com. Beyond the Bench is sponsored by BiPro, the ideal lifestyle choice for athletes and health enthusiasts, by providing clean protein without artificial ingredients or sugars. Whether you're looking for a pre- or post-workout supplement or a quick drink on the go, visit motisports.com to receive 25% off your next BiPro item.